Religious reformers have always been pivotal in reshaping faith and tradition. The statement, religious reformers, in seeking to live and speak the truth, impact the religious lives of adherents and trajectory of religious traditions, perfectly exhibits their transformative influence. A religious reformer is someone who challenges established practices and beliefs to align with their understanding of divine truth. Their pursuit of truth reflects an unwavering commitment to their faith and principles, often requiring the defiance of powerful institutions and traditions. Their determination not only transforms the lives of individual adherents, inspiring them to engage with their faith in new ways, but also redefines the structures and doctrines of entire religious traditions. Martin Luther's pursuit of truth illustrates how religious reformers live and speak what they view as the truth, transforming faith and tradition. His belief in sola scriptura, the idea that scripture alone is the foundation of Christian faith, was the driving force behind his challenge to the Catholic Church's authority. Luther's unwavering commitment to biblical truth not only exposed corruption, but also ignited one of the most religious movements in history, the Protestant Reformation. In the 16th century, the Catholic Church wielded immense spiritual and political authority. Yet, practices like the sale of indulgences was a clear exhibit of their corruption. Indulgences were promoted as a way to reduce punishment for sins to the public, which could be bought for money. To Luther, this wasn't of biblical teachings. He argued that salvation could only be achieved through faith, not financial transactions or church intermediaries. Luther's stance against the indulgences was rooted in the belief that church had strayed from its spiritual mission, prioritizing wealth and power over scripture. Luther's commitment to truth was demonstrated through bold actions. In 1517, he published a 95 Thesis which he nailed to the door of Wittenberg Castle Church. It was a document that criticized the church's sale of indulgence and questioned its authority to grant salvation. This wasn't just a critique, it was a call to reform that challenged the foundation of the church's practices. The 95 Theses were distributed widely, sparking debate across Europe and marking the beginning of the Protestant Reformation. The stakes of Luther's actions rose dramatically in 1521 at the Diet of Worms, an imperial assembly of the Holy Roman Empire issued by Emperor Charles V. Summoned to defend his teachings, Luther was ordered to recant his writing, including the 95 Theses and other works that challenged church doctrines. Refusal would mean excommunication and possibly the threat of execution, marking this as a crucial turning point. However, Luther steadily refused, famously declaring,
"Here I stand. I can do no other. God help me."
This act of defiance demonstrated his unwavering commitment to living and speaking the truth, even in the face of severe consequences. Luther's pursuit of truth came with significant consequences. While his defiance fractured Christianity, leading to the creation of Protestant denominations and sparking religious conflicts, it also inspired millions of adherents and set a precedent for reform. His actions demonstrated the profound impact a determined reformer could have on reshaping faith and tradition when seeking to speak and live the truth. Additionally, Martin Luther's reforms, driven by his pursuit to live and speak the truth, profoundly impacted the religious lives of adherents. By challenging the Catholic Church's authority over salvation and scripture, Luther encouraged individuals to take ownership of their faith, exemplifying the transformative impact reformers can have when guided by commitment to truth. Before Luther's reforms, the Church maintained strict control over spiritual knowledge. The Bible, written in Latin, was inaccessible to most people, leaving adherents dependent on priests to interpret Scripture. Salvation, too, was mediated through church rituals like indulgences, where forgiveness was essentially sold. The system fostered a transactional relationship with faith, distancing believers from a personal connection to God. One of Luther's most transformative impacts to the life of adherents was translating the Bible into German, the common language. This made scripture accessible to ordinary believers for the first time, fracturing the church's monopoly on spiritual knowledge. Adherents could now read and interpret God's words directly, allowing for a personal relationship with God with no organizational mediation. This impact not only encouraged greater literacy, but also encouraged individuals to seek and interpret a personal relationship with God. Luther's doctrine of sola fide, or justification by faith alone, further redefined salvation. By emphasizing direct scripture over external rituals, Luther freed adherents from the burden of purchasing indulgences and relying on church intermediaries. This teaching made salvation more accessible and personal, shifting the focus from institutional control to individual faith. The impact of these changes on adherence was profound. By removing institutional barriers to scripture and salvation, Luther brought individuals closer to their spirituality and advocated for a personal relationship with God based on individual interpretation. Thus, Luther's reforms stand as an exhibit of the enduring impact of religious reformers in the life of adherents. Martin Luther's pursuit of truth, rooted in his commitment to living and speaking it, profoundly reshaped the trajectory of Christianity. His reforms not only established new religious traditions, but also inspired a redefinition of existing practices within Catholicism. This transformation exhibits the lasting impact of religious reforms on the trajectory of religious traditions through the pursuit of the truth. Before Luther's reforms, Christianity was unified under the Catholic Church, with the Pope as its ultimate authority. This centralized structure left little room for diversity in doctrine or practice. Luther's challenge to this authority, based on sola scriptura, the belief that scripture alone is the foundation of faith, introduced a new era of theological reform, fundamentally altering the course of Christian history. The most notable impact of Luther's reforms was the establishment of Protestantism. His teachings inspired the formation of denominations like Lutheranism, which emphasized personal faith and scripture as the ultimate guide. These traditions created a more direct relationship between adherents and their faith, offering new ways to engage with Christianity. Protestantism's emphasis on individual understanding and its theological contributions enriched Christianity's practice and broadened its influence across Europe and beyond. Luther's actions also inspired significant reform within the Catholic Church. The Counter Reformation, led by the Council of Trent, reformed by Catholicism by reaffirming core doctrines and addressing internal corruption. These reforms strengthened the Church's spiritual mission, enhanced clerical education and discipline while renewing Catholic traditions. The spirit of modernization and transformation ensured that the Catholicism remained a central force in the Christian world, as well as exhibiting the impact of religious reformers on religious traditions and the trajectory. Through his unwavering pursuit of truth, Martin Luther not only introduced new traditions but also redefined existing ones. His efforts expand theological understanding and enrich Christian practices, transforming the evolution of Christianity. This legacy underscores how religious reformers can profoundly influence and reshape the trajectory of religious traditions. In conclusion, Martin Luther's pursuit of truth exhibits his unwavering commitment to Scripture as the ultimate authority that redefined Christianity, both for individual believers and for its broader traditions. Through his reforms, Luther empowered adherents by giving them direct access to Scripture and emphasizing faith over ritual. His challenge to the Catholic Church's authority led to the formation of Protestantism, a transformative movement that introduced new theological perspectives and practices. At the same time, his influence inspired internal reform within Catholicism, revitalizing its spiritual mission and traditions. Luther's legacy proves that religious reformers, through their pursuit of truth, have the power to transform faith and tradition. His actions not only shaped the lives of his time, but also ensured the continued evolution of Christianity, leaving an enduring impact that reflects the truth of the statement: religious reformers, in seeking to live and speak the truth, impact the religious lives of adherents and the trajectory of religious traditions.